Hi everyone, this is Mansouri from Mansouri Immigration Firm in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I'm going to give you some explanation in this short video about how Express Entry works, which is one of the most sought after streams under which people from outside Canada, from around the world, make applications and come to Canada as skilled workers and settle here as landed immigrants. The government of Canada historically used to have pointing systems which invited people to make applications through those pointing systems as skilled workers from out of Canada. If they met a minimum number of points without any competition with other applicants, they would be able to make applications and come to this country. However, in 2013, the government decided to follow the same path that other countries have followed, such as Australia and New Zealand, in creating an expression of interest portal. In the expression of interest, how it works is that the applicant will need to meet a minimum criteria in order to become eligible to even enter the competition. If they are eligible to enter the competition, they will create a registration application for themselves, a profile in the online portal. They will make an application, they will enter the pool of candidates. In the pool of candidates, thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of people are competing against each other in order to make it to Canada as landed immigrants. Basically, there is a big criteria of different aspects from which you can gain marks, gain points. If your score is high enough, and every now and then that government enters the pool and issues invitations to apply for qualified candidates, obviously with the highest ranking points, you will be among those who will receive an invitation to apply. And once an invitation to apply is issued for you, you can go ahead and make your application for permanent residence. So as you can probably tell, the lowest number of people who do receive an invitation to apply through each draw, each selection cycle will vary. It doesn't vary significantly, but because real people with real points with different situations are in the pool, whenever the government issues invitations to apply, the lowest ranking people who were amongst the highest ranking people who actually got invited will have different pointings. So this system is called Express Entry. And Express Entry became operationalized as of January 1st, 2015, and since has welcomed hundreds of thousands of immigrants to Canada. We are going to give you outlines about the basics, about how this system works, provide you with the knowledge that you need to have in order to determine whether you can actually apply for Express Entry or not. In this course, we will provide you with additional documentation, with additional checklists, additional pointing system summaries, and some other tools and other videos that will help you increase your knowledge and therefore your likelihood of becoming a successful candidate in Express Entry. So the basics is that expression of interest and the pool of candidates for Express Entry works in a way that three different categories that used to have their own different class for immigration are now merged into one called Express Entry. First category is federal skilled workers. Federal skilled workers is the most popular among the people that apply and come to Canada as under the Express Entry stream. Basically, you need to have enough points to qualify with the old regime of federal skilled worker, which used to say that out of in a pointing system that I will cover for you shortly, out of 100 points, you needed to have achieved at least 67 points. Once you have at least 67 points, in the old days, you would apply and wait for your file to be processed, and eventually you would receive an invitation and come to Canada. There was no competition whatsoever. But now, if nowadays with Express Entry around, you need to become qualified under Federal Skilled Worker Program, and once qualified, it's not the end of the road. Now you have to use that eligibility as a pass in order to enter the pool of candidates. And as I explained, you need to then wait for an invitation to apply. And if you're looking at the minimum lowest points that are being issued an invitation to apply. If you don't have enough points and you're not that optimistic on receiving an invitation to apply with regard to the current competition, you need to find ways to increase your points. We will cover what areas give you additional points later in this course, so you will know where to look for example, a job offer, or how to enhance your language abilities in order to gain more points and become more likely to receive an invitation to apply. The second class that also enters the pool with you, with federal skilled workers, is Canadian Experience class. Canadian Experience class was a non-point based system in the past that basically said if you were a temporary worker in Canada and you worked for 1 year in certain occupations, obviously, not in low skilled occupations, in skilled occupations, and you met a minimum English or French requirement, and you wanted to settle outside of Quebec, all of what we have, by the way, all of what we have to say today about express entry is for people who are destined out of the province of Quebec. The province of Quebec and its immigration is completely separate and excluded from express entry. So going back to Canadian Experience class, those people, if they had at least minimum 1 year of experience in Canada in a certain occupation list, and they spoke English or French, they could apply and get their PR. However, just like federal skilled workers, these days now they have to use that eligibility and enter the pool and compete with federal skilled workers and the rest of Canadian Experience class candidates. Once they receive an invitation to apply, they can make their application and come to Canada as a PR. The third class that enters the pool with you and shares the process and the express entry platform with you is federal skilled tradespeople. Federal skilled tradespeople are people who have experience in a trade job, such as plumbing, welding, etc. They're not among the skilled workers as we define them here in Canada, but they are not non-skilled either. They're skilled trades. So their language minimum threshold is different, their pointing is different, and they have their own draw, their own invitation to apply in the express entry system. The invitation to apply and draws for the Federal Skilled Worker Program candidates and Canadian Experience class candidates is done together for both of these classes, and is done usually at least twice a month. So it's more frequent, there is more demand in it, so there is more supply in it. However, Federal Skilled Trades draws is usually done only twice per year. Excuse me. So although these three share the same playground, but the rules is different for Canadian Experience class and Federal Skilled Workers as those for the Federal Skilled Trades program. So, as you have probably learned so far, if you do not meet the eligibility of at least one of the above mentioned three criteria, you should not think about submitting an expression of interest, because there will be no way that you will become qualified and remain in the pool of candidates. So a federal skilled worker class has minimum requirements that you have to meet. In addition to the minimum requirements, once you met them, you have to verify and see if you gain at least 67 points out of 100 points. So both criteria must be met. Let's talk about the minimum requirements. With the minimum requirements, you need to have at least 1 year of full-time continuous work experience in the past 10 years. Meaning, when I say continuous, this means you cannot combine your casual or summer jobs or temporary jobs for different employers in different time spans, put them together and accumulate 12 months and say, hey, I have 1 year experience. You need to have continuous work experience. Also, your work experience needs to be among NOC codes A, O, or B. NOC stands for National Occupational Classification. In Canada, we categorize different occupations and assign them with 4-digit codes. For example, a job can have a Noc code of 1241. This 4-digit code is exclusive to this particular position. However, there are 5 different groups under which these codes are categorized, or combined together. The first group is managerial positions, and a big number of 4-digit codes, 4-digit coded occupations are under that. These managerial occupations start with a subgroup number O, or letter O. The second is A, which is for high skilled positions. Another skilled level positions group is called group B. And these 3 groups are eligible for most of what we want to talk about in this course, and for most of what we want to talk about express entry. The remaining 2 groups, D and C, belong to the lower classes of occupations and more generic, more labor-like occupations, which are not among the skilled or high-skilled level occupations. These include dishwashers or cashiers or food counter attendants. So these, you have to make sure the minimum of 1-year experience that you want to claim in the past 10 years in order to meet the minimum criteria for federal skilled worker program falls under falls under O, A, or B groups, one of these groups in the Noc system. There is further explanation and detail about how to calculate and how to make sure your work experience is qualified that you can later on read in this in the presentation material that I am going over with you, and you can go ahead with it and read and educate yourself. The second requirement is language. As you know, Canada has 2 official languages, English and French. And for both languages, we have a system called Canadian Language Benchmark. In Canadian Language Benchmark, which is on a scale of 0 to 12, we give assigned points for people's language abilities on 4 different skill sets: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. You need to meet a minimum of Canadian language benchmark equivalent of skill 7 out of 12. In most cases, for IELTS General, this means minimum 6 in each band score. If you are anything below that, you do not meet the minimum requirements, just like the requirement of 1 year of work experience. So when it comes to education, you have to have completed your high school. So you cannot enter the pool or become eligible for federal skilled worker program if you're not educated. So you need to have at least your secondary or post-secondary, preferably post-secondary education in Canada or abroad. If your education was done abroad, you need to contact one of the approved suppliers and have them assess your education in Canada so that the government makes sure what you're claiming as your background, as your education, is in fact in line with the same level in Canada. We call this process Educational Credential Assessment, or ECA. The last requirement is for you to gain, as I said, at least 67 points out of 100 in order to pass the minimum threshold for federal skilled worker program. This 67 points is achieved through 6 different selection criteria. We will go over the selection criteria with you now, the first one of which is language. Regardless of whether you're claiming your first language, first official language, it doesn't have to be your mother tongue. When we say first language, we mean either French or English. Regardless of which one you choose, you will get points, as outlined here, based on each band scores level. For instance, if your first language is English and you obtained an IELTS results, and let's not forget IELTS must be only in general format, not in academic. And your reading, writing, and speaking, for instance, is, let's assume all of your skills are 7 for each band score. When we convert these marks to those of CELPIP or CLB, 3 of your band scores, reading, writing, and speaking, which are 7, will translate to 9 in CLB. So they each will give you 6 points here. However, your listening, the equivalency of your listening 7 in IELTS comes to a level 8 in CELPIP. There is a table. You can use that table to convert your different approved language results to those of CELPIP. So in this case, you will receive 18 points plus 5 points, which brings you to 23 points for your first selection factor. The second selection factor, second selection factor is your education. So different points for different education backgrounds. If you have a post-secondary diploma or certificate that lasted 2 years for you to achieve, you will get 19 points. If you have a master's degree, you will achieve 23 points. All explanations are right here. Third criteria under the selection factors is your work experience. And again, let's not forget, when we say work experience, we mean among NOC groups O, A, or B, no C or D. Let us not get confused, because many of us, when we are younger, or depending on our life situation, we have worked in positions that are among categories C and D, so you have to exclude those work experience hours or years. So you can receive up to 15 points depending on how many years of work experience you have under this section. Fourth selection factor is your age. You can achieve a maximum of 12 points if you're between the ages of 18 and 35. And as soon as you go above 35, you start losing points. Doesn't mean it will become impossible for you to apply. It only means you will have less points in this section, which you have to compensate in other sections. Selection factor number 5 is arranged employment. Arranged employment is very tricky. For each person's situation, they need either an LMIA, which is a labor market impact assessment, a document issued to the Canadian employer after they go thoroughly through the hiring and recruiting process in Canada, show their genuine efforts in hiring Canadian permanent residents or Canadian citizens, and once they in good faith put in so much effort and are not able to find a Canadian to fill that position, they can offer that job to you. Also, there are a big number of LMIA exemptions that might concern you depending on your country of nationality or depending on the class or the situation that you're entering Canada. So for some people, there is no need for LMIA. There is only need for arranged employment through employment portal, which we can talk about later. But you have to be very mindful of how and what specific requirements are for quote-unquote arranged employment so that you can achieve those 10 points. Selection factor number 6 is adaptability. You can receive adaptability factors for different reasons. For example, if you studied in Canada, or if you have worked in Canada. In case you're married, if your spouse speaks English or French above a certain level, or if you have relatives in Canada. You can go over the details in this part of our slides and see which one concerns you and applies to you. However, you need to be mindful of the fact that there is a maximum points available under this section, which is 10. So you cannot basically receive all the points and go beyond 10. If you meet more criteria than 10, good for you, but no points available. Okay. So this is it about the selection factors. As you can see, 100 points are available. However, only 67 or above will suffice in order for you to qualify as a skilled workers and enter the pool of candidates. The other part of your minimum requirements for eligibility is settlement funds. You need to show the officer that you have enough funds in order to support yourself once you arrive to Canada. Because obviously, regardless of how talented and how experienced as a skilled worker you are, you need some money to support yourself and potentially your family during the first few months or few weeks of living in Canada until you land your first job. However, if you have a valid job offer from a Canadian employer, this requirement will be waived. Therefore, be mindful if you don't have a job offer, take a look at the table that we will provide as part of this package that shows how much the government expects you to have on you in form of money, depending on the size of your family, meaning yourself, your spouse, and your dependent children. So we're reaching the conclusion of our federal skilled worker assessment portion. There are a few tips that I wanted to share with you. Later in the course, we will learn that some experience will not count towards Canadian experience. For the purposes of Canadian experience class, which is our second pathway that we will discuss, which is completely separate from federal skilled workers, and also for the purposes of the Express Entry's comprehensive ranking system for the purposes of the pool. However, for the purposes of this first step for federal skilled worker, self-employment, if you have experience being a self-employed person, be it in Canada or abroad, will count towards your eligibility for federal skilled worker program. Employment while you were a student in Canada or outside of Canada, it does count. Canadian education, if you have Canadian education, it will never expire. And you will not need an educational assessment for it. Also, the work described in the first requirement is different. I mean, the minimum 1 year job experience is different from the other section whereby you got more points for your work experience. Here's a quick checklist for you to take a look at and see whether you meet the minimum criteria to become eligible for FSW. First, just check to see if you have the 1 year work experience and it is under NOC groups A or B. Second, check whether you meet at least one of Canada's official languages above CLB level 7. Also check to see if you have education and you can demonstrate it through an ECA or whether it's a Canadian education which doesn't need an ECA. Also calculate your points. It was fairly easy. We will also provide these slides to you as part of this presentation. You can calculate and see whether you will achieve 67 points or not. Also, if you need to demonstrate settlement funds, meaning if you do not have a job offer, make sure you have the settlement funds available to demonstrate as part of your application. So our second class is Canadian experience class. As I said before, you need at least 1 year of full-time or equivalent of full-time job experience in Canada in a skill level A or B or O in the past 3 years. Remember, the minimum 1 year experience in federal skilled worker program was in the past 10 years. However, in the Canadian experience class, also known as CEC, your minimum 1 year of Canadian experience needs to be during the past 3 years. For occupations, O and A, you need a minimum CLB, just like federal skilled worker, of 7 in all of your different 4 skills. If your occupation was a B group, your CLB needs to be 5 or higher. So as you can see, you might have worked in Canada for 1 year or more, and because of your lack of language abilities, you cannot qualify under federal skilled worker. However, should your work experience be in the category B, which includes a big number of NOC codes, big number of different jobs, then you can get away with a CLB level 5 and enter the pool. You need to have a valid status as a worker during qualifying period. Meaning, unlike the federal skilled worker program, if your work experience in Canada was obtained while you were on a status other than a worker, if you were an international student on a study permit, if you were a visitor here, you cannot count those days of work experience towards your Canadian experience class eligibility. This is very important to note. Again, just like the previous program, just like any program in the Express Entry system, your intended destination in Canada to settle must not be Quebec. The province of Quebec is completely excluded from Express Entry. Some quick facts in contrast with the federal skilled worker program. CEC eligible applicants do not need settlement funds. So if you have Canadian experience class eligibility, you do not need to demonstrate money. Your work experience in Canada, again, unlike federal skilled worker program, does not need to be continuous. And you can combine periods of work among various NOC codes, among various jobs, so long as they all fall under the eligible Noc groups. Again, O, A, and B. And some other facts that you can see here. Again, for people who are in Canada and have worked here, Canadian experience class is one of the easiest streams among the 3, because unlike federal skilled worker, it doesn't have a pointing system. Some of the minimum criteria that the other program has, this one does not. And the following program, federal skilled trades program that we are going to discuss later, also has some limitations, some compulsory regulatory body or work experience requirements that Canadian experience class fortunately does not have. Next one is federal skilled trades program. This program is for occupations among major groups 72, 73, 82, and 92, which is basically for skilled tradespeople, such as welders, such as plumbers, and other skilled tradespeople. And the minimum benchmark for CLB for language requirement is 4 in reading and writing, which is very low, and 5 in speaking and listening, which is still lower compared to the federal skilled worker program. But as I said, federal skilled trades program has only roughly two draws per year, 2 sets of invitations to apply or issue, unlike federal skilled program, which has tons of different invitation to apply rounds per year. So meaning bigger number of people come to Canada under the other 2 programs, contrary to federal skilled trades. So with federal skilled trades program, you need at least, and I put emphasis, at least, because you will definitely end up needing more. But just to qualify, you need at least 2 years of work experience in a skilled trades within the past 5 years, not 10 years, 5 years period. You need to meet the job requirements of that NOC code. So if you need a certification or qualification, you need those. You need a job offer from a Canadian employer. If you don't have a job offer, you need a certificate of qualification from a Canadian relevant regulatory body. This is a good solution for skilled trades people who don't have a job offer in place in Canada. You can find the relevant corresponding regulatory body or authority that regulates and issues certificates of qualification or red seal or whatever the case might be in that particular occupation in the particular province of your destination. You need to get in touch with them, see their application process, make your application, and eventually if they approve you and award you with a certificate of qualification, then you will waive the requirement of a Canadian job offer. And again, if you don't have a job offer, just like Federal Skilled Worker Program, you need the settlement funds to demonstrate that you can support yourself and your family in Canada. Some further explanation here about how you can assess your work experience with respect to the Federal Skilled Trades Program's qualifications. You need to make sure that you go over your NOC, check out the lead statements for the occupation. This stands for all classes. Whenever you're claiming that you have a certain type of work experience, you have to find the corresponding Noc or NOC, enter the NOC's description, locate the main duties and lead statements of that particular job, and see whether these correspond to the activities that you perform. These correspond to what your employer will have to say about you in a work reference letter. These factors are important. A lot of people are refused through express entry because the officer will argue that what I have seen in your letter of experience or in your CV for that matter does not or partially does correspond to those of your employment position in your relevant Noc code. If there is an employment requirement, which for most NOC codes is, you must meet them. For instance, you cannot claim that you have work experience as a plumber while you don't have the necessary employment requirements outlined in the NOC section for plumbers. A very bold example is that I can't claim that I was a lawyer in my home country while I don't have the relevant education or qualifications outlined in my NOC code. In NOC code for lawyers say you need so much education, so much work experience, so and so licensing. If you don't have those in your home country, your employment history does not correspond to what we consider as a lawyer in this example in Canada. These are some examples. So an example is a plumber must be certified in Poland before they may practice plumbing independently in that country. A plumber from Poland would need to show proof of their certification and demonstrate that they have at least 2 years of full-time experience in the last 5 years as a certified plumber in Poland. In Ontario, carpenters need not to be certified to practice carpentry independently. So a carpenter from Ontario would have to show that they have at least 2 years of full-time carpentry work experience in Ontario in the past 5 years again, along with evidence that the certification is not required. Usually you can provide the second part, you can provide evidence for the certification not being required from the relevant website. From the authorities' websites, you can search and see which occupations are regulated and which are not. Also in the Noc, for different provinces, if there is need for regulatory certification or licensing, usually those are mentioned on the Noc's description, employment requirements. Applicants under the Federal Skilled Trade category must meet at least one of the following. So they need at least to to hold a certificate of qualification from Canada, or they need a job offer from up to 2 employers for continuous full-time work at least 30 hours per week in Canada for a total period of at least 1 year. So your job offer does not need to be indeterminate. It needs to be valid for at least 1 year, and 2 employers can jointly offer you this 1 year or more worth of employment opportunity in Canada. This is very flexible compared to the federal skilled worker program. Again, just like the other programs, you must plan to live out of Quebec in order to fall under these categories. You need the settlement funds. So again, we will provide you with a table of the most recent government-issued low-income cutoff tables, so that you know how to calculate whether you meet enough financial self-sufficiency for your particular case or not. The provincial nominee program. Different provinces, except for Quebec, have agreements with respect to immigration with the federal government. And through those agreements, they can nominate their desired applicants to come to their province, settle there as permanent residents. Quebec's agreement is different with the federal government. Through their agreement, Quebec selects its applicants. We don't want to talk about that process. With provincial nominee program, different provinces nominate and issue a certificate of nomination. Each of them have different pathways for different purposes, and you will usually choose one of their suitable pathways, apply to them. If they approve you through their own process, they will issue you your certificate of nomination. And this certificate of nomination will attach to your application in Express Entry, so that you will qualify under, for instance, you had already qualified under Canadian Experience Class, now you can become a PNP with BC and meet both. But having just provincial nominee alone doesn't allow you to enter the pool of candidates with Express Entry. With Express Entry, you need to qualify with one of the 3 categories that we just talked about, and then should you have provincial nomination, you will receive additional points. Some general points for you to remember, which are important. Your language testing must be IELTS general training, not academic, or CELPIP general. CELPIP is the Canadian version of IELTS, if you will. Language test results are only valid for up to 2 years, meaning when you apply and enter the pool, your language test results must be younger than 2 years. And even once you receive your invitation to apply for your PR, still your language results need to be 2 years or less. Your ECA or your educational verification report needs to be younger than 5 years. So contrary to language results which expire in 2 years, these ECAs expire in 5 years. For federal skilled worker program and federal skilled trades programs, if LMIA or labor market impact assessment provided by the employer, if the LMIA supports only PR, an applicant does not have a valid work permit or cannot work under the relevant regulation, which is Regulation 186 in Canada, they must prove settlement funds. When your employer obtains LMIA, they can specify whether they want to offer you this job for you to come to Canada and become a PR, or they want to offer you this job just to come to Canada and work temporarily, which enables you only to get a work permit. So if your LMIA doesn't support you for getting a work permit in addition to your PR, then you need to, and if you don't have other means of being eligible for a work permit, for example, you don't have an open work permit because you studied in Canada or because your spouse is a student here in Canada and you have a work permit, Then, obviously, because you can't work, you need to show that you have enough funds to support yourself. We did mention this part about Federal Skilled Trade Program. Qualifying work experience only begins after you become independently able to practice in that trade. Independently means if you used to be a journeyman, if you used to work as an assistant to a carpenter in your country, and in your country you need at least 2 years to become a qualifying carpenter. During the first 2 years, you were just an assistant, so you cannot count those 2 years towards your eligible work experience. However, once you hit and achieve all those requirements, meet all the criteria to become considered an eligible carpenter, as of that moment onwards, you will start accumulating qualifying work experience. And we did mention that Canadian experience class never requires settlement funds. These are important, going back here, these are important because, as you can tell already, a lot of people might qualify for Canadian experience class and federal skilled worker program at the same time. But it doesn't matter as long as you have to compete in the pool and get an invitation to apply, because everyone competes only based on numbers. And in the Canadian, in the Express Entry platform, people get points from 0 to 1,200. And the minimum cutoff, minimum scores that receive invitations in most draws is usually 450 something, 452, 460, 457. These are, historically, this is the minimum that you need to be drawn out of the Express Entry pool. So as you see, it up to receiving an invitation to apply, it doesn't really matter if you are in the Canadian experience class, or if you're a federal skilled worker, or you have met both. When you log into your profile, it tells you, it indicates for you which of these two classes you've met. And some people meet both. However, the game changes once you do receive the invitation to apply and you want to apply for your permanent residence. Now you have to adhere to the regulations of that particular class. You have to indicate which class you want to apply through. If you indicate I want to apply through Federal Skilled Worker Program, now you do need the settlement funds, and all those regulations about settlement fund and its exemptions thereof does apply to you. However, if you indicate that I want my application for permanent residence to be processed under the Canadian experience class, then you don't need settlement funds. There are various differences among the two. So the choice is yours, but you have to choose wisely between which account is better for you to go through. Again, if you ever wanted to take care of your application on your own, I highly recommend enrolling in our comprehensive toolkit for Express Entry, which provides you with an enormous amount and volume of information and step-by-step guides. So what is a profile? We did cover this briefly, that for Express Entry, you need to submit your expression of interest. Basically, you're saying, Canada, hey, I just want to come to your country. I want to immigrate. Please take me. As I said, some other countries had already been doing this system, like Australia. It's an algorithm, no live person, that looks at your profile. So while the algorithm believes whatever you tell it and assigns points to you at the beginning, once you're registering your expression of interest, you cannot outsmart it, because at the end of the day, once you receive your invitation to apply, there is an officer that will assess your application against what you had declared. So it's easy to tell the system, the computer today, that I have 10 years of relevant work experience and get so many points out of it. But at the end of the day, when you want to apply with your permanent residence application, if you can't prove it, you will be refused. And in some cases, it will have huge consequences for you. It can even get you barred from applying again and coming to Canada for up to 5 years. So once you once you create your profile and answer all the questions, there is a pointing system which is called comprehensive ranking system. This comprehensive ranking system, which is a smart algorithm, it will determine whether you all are eligible for either of the one of the three criteria that we just talked about, and then it will place you inside the pool. And as I said, the highest ranking or highest scoring applicants will receive an invitation to apply. And invitation to apply draws are very frequent, sometimes every 2 weeks. After an ITA, you have 60 days. I'm recording this presentation during the COVID-19 period. During these unfortunate times, the government has extended its 60-day period to 90 days. So you have 90 days to submit your PR application. So CRS, or Comprehensive Ranking System, bases its pointing system on various factors, such as your age, your education, your language, your Canadian skill level, and whether you have an ECA report or not. Remember, anything you claim about your education, so long as your education was not done and finished in Canada, you need an ECA report. If you don't provide an ECA report, you will not get the relevant work experience. Relevant education points. And the comprehensive ranking system, which is associated again with the expression of interest, is smart, and it requires a barcode number from your ECA report. If you don't have it and you can't enter it, it won't give you the points. That's simple. Employment offers have 50 points usually with LMI or being exempt from LMI, as the case might be. NOC codes that start with 2 zeros, not just 1 zero. With 2 zeros are senior managerial positions that award 200 points. Be careful about these, because if you have a job offer in Canada and the employer is offering you a 00 job, such as senior manager in a factory or in a trade or in a company, not every company is eligible for having a senior manager. If the company isn't large enough, and or if your previous work experience doesn't justify that for you to be considered a senior manager, then the officer might only award you 50 points and call you a regular manager. And in that case, you might be refused. Provincial nomination, as I mentioned before, awards 600 additional points to you, which will extremely boost you. If you have siblings, with federal skilled worker program, having a big variety of relatives would give you the additional adaptability points, such as aunts, uncles, grandchildren, grandparents, sisters, brothers. However, in here, because the pointing system is different, you will only get additional points if you have a sibling, a sister or a brother, or your spouse has a brother or a sister who is a PR, who is a Canadian citizen in Canada. You will get additional points for speaking the second language of Canada. If your first language was French, for example, you will get additional bonus points if you speak English, or vice versa. So all of your points must be valid whenever you submit your application to expression of interest, and also the same points must be valid, such as your ECA, as I mentioned before, even when you apply for PR, except for age. Your age will be locked when you receive your invitation to apply and make your application. So here is, we will provide you with this table. Here is a list of how you can get points. And this part, well, these parts are easy. Age, education, first language, second language, Canadian work experience. When we say Canadian work experience, you must refer to the Canadian work experience regulations. Um, Self-employment doesn't count. If you have self-employment experience in Canada, it will not give you Canadian experience points. If you worked while you were a student here, you will not get additional points for Canadian work experience. These are all explained in very detail in our comprehensive ranking system, in our comprehensive express entry toolkit. You will get skill transferability factor points if you have a certain level of English and above. Meaning, if your English is CLB 9, you will get additional points. In fact, your points will double for your education, for your foreign work experience, etc. So speaking English not only assigns, or speaking French in an enhanced level, not only assigns additional points to your relevant second and first language points category, but it can also significantly add additional points to your other factors, such as education and work experience. Comprehensive ranking system is also smart in a way that if you have a spouse, if you have an accompanying spouse and you're applying as a couple, the way points are awarded to you are different in order to keep the system near fair. Meaning your education as a single person can have up to 150 points, while if you're married, your education can have a maximum of 140 points. This is not fair according to the government who designed this, because if you want to bring your spouse, we prefer that your spouse is skilled and educated and language proficient like yourself. If you have a spouse that you want to bring with you that is unskilled, doesn't speak English, doesn't speak French, hasn't educated at all, we're not saying you can't bring them, but at least they will reduce your points so that the environment is more fair for those who are coming either alone as a fresh skilled worker or as a couple who are both skilled. It's not my opinion, it's just the way that the designers of the system have looked at it. So there is a thing called lock-in date. For your age, also for the ages of your dependent children, you can only bring your dependent children if they're under 22 years of age. And determining your age or your children's age for the purposes of including or excluding you or them in an application, the date that your age will get locked is the date that you will receive an invitation to apply. So regardless of when you enter the pool, it's important that when you can come out of the pool with an invitation to apply, and it's only then that entire families' ages will get locked. And no matter how much or how long the permanent residence application will take to process, the ages going up and beyond the allowed numbers will not adversely affect your application. So much more details about the comprehensive ranking system is provided here for you. I invite you to take a look at them in calculating your points. Some additional factors that give you points is, as I said, having a sibling in Canada as a PR or citizen, not an international student or a temporary resident for that matter. 15 points. French or English as a second language, CLB of 7 or above, another 15 points. Canadian education can give you up to 30 points depending on the level. If it's a college level, 15. If it's a master's degree, 30 points. Arranged employment, I did explain about it, between 50 and or 200. But again, be very careful about 200. I have seen many people who have been refused with 200-point job offers, and the officer's argument was that you are not qualified for being considered a senior manager, or your employer is not qualified. Looking at their financial statements, their turnover, their revenue, their number of employees, overall, you were just a manager, not a senior manager. Huge difference. Huge difference. And provincial nomination, very tempting. It has 600 points. So I do encourage you to take a look at different provincial programs and see whether you can qualify under any of them, except for Quebec, obviously. Some further explanation about those items up there. Some tips for you about creating your profile. After you confirm your eligibility to create a profile, after you confirm that you are eligible at least in one of the 3 categories, and when you want to enter the comprehensive ranking system pool, here is some tips for you. If the information doesn't impact eligibility or points, do not enter it into the profile. Just don't give information that is not relevant. If the client cannot prove it, do not enter it. Meaning, don't come up with something that you are not even sure of, or something that you don't have proof for. Another factor that is not written here, but I consider worthwhile mentioning, is that many people have applied to come to Canada in one way or the other in the past, such as international students or coming to Canada as a tourist. Regardless of the result of that application, whether it was approved or refused, it is very important for you to note that your information, the ones you provided to the government, will indefinitely be kept as part of your records. So if you made an application 2 years ago and you claim to have been a butcher in Iran or in Germany, don't come around now making your application and claiming for the same period that you claimed you were a butcher, don't claim that you are an engineer. You will conflict the information, you will contradict your own previous statements, and this can again result to a finding of a misrepresentation on your side, which can become problematic. So again, remember that the comprehensive ranking system's pointing method is different. The rubric is different from those of Federal Skilled Worker Program. Here is some minimums for you to remember as to the minimum requirements of each program or each area that you can fall under and qualify before entering the pool. These are some items that you need in order to create your application. And again, for submitting your expression of interest, you only need at that stage information to enter to the online forms. You don't really need any documents except for your language results and your ECA, because you need the numbers, the barcode numbers of those 2 documents to enter. However, in the expression of interest phase, registration phase, you do not need to upload any documents. It's only making claims and statements and having the computer assign points to you and enter you into the pool. It's only after and in case of receiving an invitation to apply that you have to provide proof, provide documentation. There are a few scenarios here that will help you in better understanding different situations. There is an example about John, which is a very good example. It will help you go over it and learn how to create your profile and how to look at your own express entry profile. You have to update your profile. Some items will become updated by the system. For example, the system will remember your birth date and it will change, obviously reduce your points once it's your birthday and you grow 1 year older. However, some points will not be updated by the system because the system doesn't know them. If you got a new degree, you have to update it in the system so you get more points. And once you make an amendment or make changes to your application, again, you have to submit it. There is no fee associated to the expression of interest. However, you have to keep the system up to date about yourself. There are different, as I mentioned, there are differences between the stage of creating a profile and the stage of submitting your PR application. At the stage of submitting your profile, all you need is information to get awarded points. But after receiving the ITA, you need proof to submit your statements. Here are some practice tips. It's useful for you to create an information or assessment sheet for yourself with something like a table to assess your scores and leave notes for yourself. It is important to gather the majority of your supporting evidence before receiving an invitation to apply, preferably before creating your express entry profile. But if that is not the case, at least prepare everything before receiving an ITA, because you never know. You might enter the pool and have enough points and receive the invitation to apply right away or very soon, and you won't have enough time to gather all the documentation and in most cases to translate them into the Canadian official languages. Some documents that typically take too long to obtain are police certificates from various countries. From the US, for example, you need an FBI report. In some cases, it takes more than 3 months to be issued, whereas from Sweden, a police certificate can be obtained within 24 hours. So these are some factors that you have to be mindful about. Otherwise, you will receive the invitation to apply and your 90-day period will elapse and you will lose your chances to making the application. So your work experience proof, the most important of which is the company's work reference letter, has to have specifications. It has to be on the company's letterhead. It needs to contain the company's information, contact information, address, phone, email, etc. The person who signs the work reference letter needs to be known. We need to know what is their name, what is their position, what is their job title. They have to mention the number of hours that you worked per week, when you started your job, when you ended it, how much did you earn, what was your job title, and the details of your job duties needs to be aligned with those duties on your relevant NOC code. Again, the golden rule, you must be able to prove all of your claims in the expression of interest. There are numerous potential errors that people make in the CRS systems that you have to be prepared for. And also the system will make some errors that you have to be prepared for them. Express entry will calculate points early. An example is John began his current job as a programmer on NOC 2174 on March 2017. In his profile, the start date of his job is indicated as March 2017. Work history is not date specific. Only month and year are available to enter. Nothing has changed in John's profile since it was entered, but on February 1st, 2018, his points have increased for no apparent reason. On February 1, 2018, Express Entry has calculated that John now has 1 year of work experience, meaning the Express Entry assumes that you started your work on the beginning of the month that you entered. IRCC knows about this error, but we don't know if they're going to fix it or not. If John submits a PR application based on the new calculation of points, it will be refused. So John needs to make sure that he will submit the application after he reaches 1 year in actuality. John is this is an actual case. The client was eligible for Federal Skilled Worker Program, currently on Canada, on 12-month open work permit, started current job on June 11, 2015, based on education, language, and foreign work experience. They had 441 points. On April 30th, 2016, and on May 1st, 2016, score increased to 494 points. Eligibility changed. Applicant received an ETA on March 2016. The client was advised that we had to decline the ITA. Because we are experienced, we know, our colleagues knew that if that application was submitted, according to that ITA, it was going to be refused. So here's an illustration of a hypothetical perfect express entry candidate. Is eligible for Federal Skilled Worker, Canadian Experience Class, or Federal Skilled Trades. They're young, as I said in the beginning, between 20 to 35. They're well educated. They're able to achieve high scores in English or French, better if both. As you remember, in the comprehensive ranking system, we get additional points for a second language. And they have at least 1 year of skilled work experience. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope I covered the basics of the three categories and the express entry. It's a very highly competitive system, but if you know what you're doing, you can enter it, and you can enhance your points by bettering your language, or getting a better test results, or introducing a second language to your profile. If you have the opportunity to secure a job offer in Canada, obviously it will significantly help you. If you are completely hopeless in terms of being able to compete in the pool, meaning if you have, for example, 350 points, there is no point for you getting a better test result, because obviously you won't reach 450. So what I recommend for you, in addition to searching actively for an employment offer in Canada, I recommend exploring options to come to Canada as an international student. Although you will have to pay for your schooling in Canada, but not only, in most cases, it will allow you to qualify for a longer open work permit post-graduation, but also it will assign many points to you in express entry. It will enable you to have the opportunity to work, which is the first step towards securing a real, genuine job offer from a Canadian employer. So all of these are good investments in your future. And again, you're investing in your own CV because you're gaining Canadian education, which will help you significantly in your job search in Canada. I wish you all success. Thank you very much, and have a great day.